There are places on Earth where maps stop telling the truth. Places where animals refuse to go. Where satellites show blank terrain. Where soldiers are sent to investigate, and then told never to speak about what they found. In February of 2012, a small reconnaissance team was deployed into the frozen interior of Greenland during a NATO environmental survey. Officially, their mission was simple. Survey a newly exposed valley revealed by melting glacier ice. The valley was marked on the map as Grid 17. According to the official report, the team discovered magnetic disturbances caused by underground minerals. But the soldiers who were actually there remember something else. Something moving beneath the stone. Something ancient. And something that may still be traveling beneath the ice today. This is the suppressed field testimony of the creature in Grid 17. My name is Captain Daniel Mercer, United States Army. In early 2012 I was temporarily assigned to a joint NATO cold weather reconnaissance program working alongside Arctic Command of the Royal Danish Army. The mission we received looked routine. Satellite imagery from the European Space Agency showed that glacial retreat in western Greenland had uncovered several valleys that had been buried under ice for thousands of years. Our job was simple. Go in. Scan the terrain. Check for geological hazards. Then move on. The valleys were divided into coordinates. My team was assigned Grid 17. There were 4 of us. Sergeant Eric Lund, an Arctic scout from Denmark. Corporal Jason Alvarez, communications specialist. Specialist Nolan Greaves, geospatial technician. And me. We carried standard cold weather reconnaissance gear. 416 Hong Kong dollars rifles. Thermal optics. Satellite radios. Ground-penetrating radar. It wasn't a combat patrol. We expected nothing more dangerous than unstable ice. But when the helicopter dropped us 2 kilometers south of Grid 17, Sergeant Lund said something strange. He stared down into the valley for a long time. Then he said quietly, "Animals don't cross that place." At the time, we thought he was joking. He wasn't. It took about 20 minutes to reach the slope leading into the valley. At first, everything looked normal. Snow. Wind. Arctic silence. Then we saw the tracks. Fox. Caribou. Arctic hare. Hundreds of animal prints moving across the snow. But then the tracks suddenly stopped. Not gradually. Not fading. Stopped. A perfectly clear line cut across the slope. On one side, tracks everywhere. On the other side, nothing. No prints. No movement. Just untouched snow stretching across the valley floor. Sergeant Lund crouched and brushed snow away from the ground. "This isn't drift," he said. "It's a boundary." The silence in the valley was different too. Even the Arctic usually has sound winds scraping snow, distant ice cracking, birds overhead. But Grid 17 felt sealed. Then our radios started to crackle. Static. Our satellite signal began cutting in and out. Greaves checked his compass. The needle spun slowly. "Magnetic interference," he said. That explanation would later become the official report. But at that moment, something else caught our attention. The smell. About a kilometer inside the valley, the snow thinned out. Black stone began to appear through the ice. Smooth. Almost polished. And across that stone were massive curved grooves. Some were nearly 2 meters wide. They twisted across the valley floor in huge spiral patterns. At first Greaves thought they were ancient carvings. Maybe Inuit markings. But the more we studied them, the less that made sense. These weren't carvings. They were worn down. As if something enormous had moved across that rock, again and again, for centuries. Sergeant Lund said something then that none of us expected. He told us about a story an Inuit hunter once shared during a patrol years earlier. The hunter had warned them about certain valleys beneath the glaciers. Places where the ice sometimes breathes. Places where animals refuse to go. According to the story, those valleys belonged to something called the one beneath the stone. At the time, we assumed it was just another Arctic legend. But that night, The valley began to move. Around 7 p.m. we set up a small observation position on a ridge overlooking the center of Grid 17. That's when Greaves noticed something strange on the ground-penetrating radar. Rhythmic pulses beneath the valley floor. Slow. Regular. Exactly 23 seconds apart. Almost like a heartbeat. Then something even stranger happened. Frost began gathering inside the spiral grooves across the stone. Not randomly. The frost was forming a path. And that path was moving. The line of frost slowly traced through the grooves, traveling across the valley floor. Straight toward our ridge. 23 seconds between each shift. 23 seconds between each tremor beneath the stone. Greaves whispered, "It's following the grooves." 10 minutes later, the movement stopped directly below us. The valley went completely silent. Then the ground lifted. A section of black stone 6 meters wide slowly rose from the valley floor. Like a lid being pushed from below. No explosion. No cracking. Just pressure. Then the snow around it collapsed inward. Something massive was moving beneath the surface. At first it looked like the ground itself was shifting. But then we saw the shape. A long ridge moving under the snow. Segmented. Too long to measure. At least 40 meters before it curved back underground. The spiral grooves suddenly made sense. They weren't carvings. They were tracks worn into stone. The snow collapsed again. And something began to rise out of the earth. What emerged did not look like flesh. Its surface looked like black polished stone plates, sliding slowly against each other. No visible eyes. No limbs. Just a massive segmented body disappearing into the ground beneath it. The smell hit us immediately. Rust. Minerals. Ancient water. Alvarez whispered the only words anyone could say. Jesus Christ. The creature didn't react to our voices. But its body slowly turned, in our direction. Like it could sense us through the stone. That's when I gave the order. Fall back. We withdrew slowly. No sudden movements. Step by step back toward the ridge line. The creature remained partially above the surface. Still. Listening. Or sensing vibrations in the ground. Then we crossed the line where the animal tracks had stopped earlier. The creature froze instantly. The grinding sound stopped. Its body slowly lowered back into the earth. The stone closed above it. Within seconds, the valley looked empty again. And the moment we crossed that line, our radios came back online. Magnetic interference vanished. As if the valley had released us. The official NATO report states that Grid 17 contains magnetic mineral deposits, geological instability, subsurface seismic activity. All future expeditions were cancelled. Satellite observation of the valley was restricted. But the spiral grooves are still visible from orbit. I've reviewed the report many times over the years. Technically speaking, nothing in it is false. But it leaves out the most important detail. Something ancient is moving beneath Grid 17. Something large enough to carve roads into stone. Something animals instinctively avoid. And something that surfaced, just long enough to realize we were there. The Inuit hunters may have been right. Grid may 17th not be where the creature lives. It may only be one of the places where it passes. And if that valley is just a segment of its path, then something enormous has been traveling beneath the ice of Greenland. For longer than recorded human history. And for one night in 2012. 4 soldiers were standing directly above it. We reached the helicopter extraction point just before sunrise. None of us said much during the flight back to the operations station in Kangerlussuaq. The Arctic landscape stretched endlessly below us, frozen fjords, glaciers, and white plains that looked completely empty. But now I couldn't stop thinking about what lay beneath that emptiness. When we landed, we were taken directly into a debrief room. Standard procedure. A Danish intelligence officer sat across from us with a laptop. He asked simple questions. Did we encounter wildlife? Did we observe geological instability? Did we collect terrain samples? At first we answered normally. But when Greaves started describing the movement beneath the valley floor, the officer stopped typing. He looked up. Then he asked something strange. "Did you cross the wildlife boundary?" Sergeant Lund and I exchanged a glance. "Yes," I said. The officer leaned back in his chair. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he closed the laptop. "That will not be included in the report." 2 days later, Greaves called me into the equipment room. He had pulled archived satellite data from the previous 6 months of Arctic imaging. Grid 17 appeared in several images. At first glance, nothing unusual. But when Greaves layered the images together and played them in sequence, we saw something disturbing. The spiral grooves across the valley floor were not always in the same position. They shifted. Not by much, maybe a meter or two between images. But rock formations don't move like that. Unless something beneath them is pushing the ground upward. Greaves ran a timeline. The movements occurred roughly once every 11 to 14 days. The same way a large animal might pass through the same path on a regular migration route. Except this path wasn't across land. It was beneath it. Later that week, Sergeant Lund introduced us to an older Inuit tracker who worked occasionally with Danish Arctic patrols. His name was Akituk. He had spent most of his life hunting across the inland ice. Lund showed him the satellite image of Grid 17. The old man studied it quietly. Then he pointed to the spiral grooves. He spoke slowly. "These are not marks. They are roads." Greaves asked him what kind of roads. Akituk shook his head. "Not for people." He explained that older Inuit stories spoke about something that lived beneath the oldest rock of the island. A creature older than the glaciers themselves. The stories said it slept beneath the earth most of the time, but sometimes it traveled through the stone. When it moved, the ground would tremble. Animals would flee long before it arrived. And occasionally the ice would open where it surfaced. Akituk used a word in his language that translated roughly to the deep walker. According to the old stories, the creature was not a hunter. It didn't chase animals. It didn't attack people. It simply moved, traveling slowly through ancient tunnels beneath the island, following paths carved into the bedrock long before humans arrived. Then Akituk said something that made the room go quiet. He pointed to Grid 17 again. "That is only one door." 3 weeks after our patrol, the seismic sensors near Kangerlussuaq recorded an unusual reading. Not an earthquake. A rhythmic tremor. 23 seconds between pulses. Exactly the same interval Greaves had recorded in Grid 17. Except this time the signal was 50 kilometers south of the valley. Moving. Heading toward the coastline. When the tremors stopped, a Danish survey helicopter flew over the region. They found something strange in the ice. A long curved depression stretching across the frozen surface. Nearly half a kilometer long. The ice hadn't cracked. It had simply lifted from below. Like something enormous had brushed against it while passing underneath. 2 months after the Grid 17 patrol, our entire team was called into a classified briefing. A senior NATO officer presented a short statement. Grid 17 had been officially reclassified as a restricted geological zone. All further exploration was cancelled. Satellite imagery of the valley would now be monitored under a separate database. Then the officer said something I've never forgotten. He told us that our team was not the first group to report unexplained ground movement beneath Arctic rock formations. Similar observations had been recorded in northern Canada in the 1970s. Another in Siberia during a Soviet geological survey. And one in northern Norway in 1998. Each report described roughly the same pattern. Massive subterranean movement. Spiral-shaped rock formations. Wildlife avoidance zones. And occasional surface breaches. But no expedition had ever documented the creature clearly. Only fragments. Tracks in stone. Disturbed ice. Seismic pulses. And stories passed down through indigenous cultures for centuries. The officer ended the briefing with a simple instruction. None of this leaves the room. Before leaving Greenland, Greaves checked the satellite feed one last time. Grid 17 looked exactly the same. The valley was silent. Frozen. Empty. Then he zoomed in on one of the spiral grooves. At the center of the valley floor, something had changed. A new groove had appeared. Fresh. Cut through the stone where no track had existed before. It curved slowly across the valley and disappeared beneath the northern ridge, heading toward the interior of the island, toward places where the ice sheet is more than 3 kilometers thick. Greaves stared at the image for a long time. Then he said something quietly. "If that thing can carve through rock like that." He didn't finish the sentence. But we all understood the thought. Creatures that live beneath the ocean grow enormous because water supports their weight. Creatures that live beneath stone would need to be something else entirely. Something built to move through the bones of the earth itself. Officially, Grid 17 remains a geological anomaly. No biological activity has been recorded there. No further missions have been sent. But every few years, Arctic seismic sensors still record the same pattern. Slow tremors. 23 seconds apart. Moving across the island beneath the ice. No one knows where the path begins. And no one knows where it ends. But if the Inuit stories are correct, then the creature beneath Grid 17 is not a monster. It is simply something ancient that has been traveling the same roads for thousands of years. And occasionally, those roads pass directly beneath us. Because the most disturbing possibility isn't that we discovered something new in Grid 17. It's that we briefly witnessed something that has always been there. Moving silently beneath the world. Waiting for the ice to open. So it can breathe again. For almost a year after the Grid 17 patrol, nothing happened. At least nothing that reached us. Our team rotated out of Greenland by the end of that spring. The incident was buried inside classified geological reports, and officially the valley was considered restricted terrain due to unstable bedrock. But information has a way of circulating in military circles, particularly when something doesn't make sense. By the winter of 2013, rumors began appearing inside the Arctic Command Network. Another team had been sent back to Grid 17. Not soldiers this time. Scientists. The new expedition was assembled quietly under a joint research contract between Danish Geological Services and a NATO environmental monitoring program. Officially, the team was studying subglacial mineral deposits revealed by the retreating ice. Unofficially, they were trying to understand the seismic pulses recorded beneath the island. The team consisted of 8 people. 2 Danish geologists, a Norwegian seismologist, 3 technical engineers, 2 security personnel from the Danish army. Their equipment was far more advanced than what we had carried. Ground radar arrays, deep penetration seismic scanners, autonomous drilling rigs capable of boring nearly 50 meters into bedrock. Their objective was simple: determine whether Grid 17 contained some kind of underground cavity network or volcanic fault line. None of them were told about what we had seen. That detail never appeared in the official documentation. The survey team reached Grid 17 in early February. For the first 12 hours, everything looked normal. Their radio transmissions described the same things we had reported. Magnetic interference. The spiral grooves in the stone. The absence of animal tracks. Then the seismic scanners began picking up something unusual. Movement. Not random movement. A linear signal traveling beneath the valley floor. Slow. Steady. The signal moved along the same spiral paths carved into the rock. The team initially believed they had discovered a network of subterranean tunnels. One of the geologists even joked in the transmission logs that the tunnels looked like highways. The word caught my attention when I read the report later, because the Inuit tracker had used almost the same description. Roads. At 1740 that evening, the expedition began drilling into one of the deepest grooves at the center of Grid 17. The drill penetrated 3 meters of stone easily. Then 5. Then 10. At 12 meters, the drilling system shut down automatically. Sensors detected heat. Not geothermal heat. Localized heat. Something warm moving beneath the drill shaft. The team assumed they had struck a pocket of trapped water beneath the rock. They restarted the drill. But before it could continue, the ground trembled. Seismic sensors recorded the first pulse. 23 seconds later. Another one. Then another. Exactly the same pattern we had recorded the year before. The expedition leader ordered everyone to shut down the drilling rig and switch to observation mode. Ground radar began scanning the valley floor. What the instruments showed was difficult to interpret at first. A long cylindrical mass moving slowly beneath the bedrock. Massive. Much larger than anything natural geologists expected to find underground. The radar operator initially assumed it was an error in the system. But the signal continued moving, following the spiral grooves, traveling directly toward the drill site. The distance closed steadily. 200 meters. 100. 50. Then the valley floor began to rise. The first crack appeared directly beside the drilling rig. Black stone shifted upward like pressure building beneath a sealed container. The security personnel ordered the scientists to step back. Video footage from one of the helmet cameras recorded the next few seconds. The stone didn't shatter. It separated. Slowly. Like two plates sliding apart. Something enormous pushed up through the opening. The video cuts out for several seconds at that point due to electromagnetic interference. When the signal returns, the camera is pointing toward the ground. The operator appears to have fallen backward. But in the reflection on the visor glass, something else is visible. A long curved structure rising from the ground. Segmented. Black. Layered like stone plates sliding over one another. And far larger than the portion we saw during our patrol. The final radio message from the expedition lasted just 9 seconds. The recording was included in the classified briefing months later. At first there is only static. Then someone speaks. It's the Norwegian seismologist. His voice is controlled but tense. He says, "It's following the paths." A pause. Then another voice asks something we cannot hear clearly. The seismologist replies, "No. I don't think it's attacking." Another pause. Then the final words recorded from Grid 17. "I think we're standing on one of its doors." The transmission ends there. Contact with the expedition was never restored. 2 days later, a Danish military recovery team flew into the valley. They expected to find damaged equipment or injured personnel. Instead, they found something stranger. The camp was still standing, tents intact, equipment untouched. The drilling rig remained exactly where it had been left. But the 8 members of the expedition were gone. No bodies. No blood. No tracks leading away from the camp. Just the same untouched snow we had seen during our patrol. The only new feature in the valley was the drill shaft itself. It had widened. The hole in the rock was now nearly 3 meters across. And the bottom of it was no longer visible. The recovery team lowered a camera down the shaft. At 15 meters, the light disappeared into darkness. Then the cable jerked violently. The camera feed filled with static. And the cable was pulled from the technician's hands. As if something beneath the rock had taken it. The shaft collapsed minutes later, sealing itself with falling stone. Grid 17 returned to silence. The disappearance of the survey team was classified as an environmental accident caused by unstable terrain. Families were told the team had fallen into a hidden geological collapse beneath the valley floor. No search teams were sent below the surface. And the valley was permanently sealed from further exploration. Satellite surveillance of the region continues to this day. I still think about something the Inuit tracker said. He told us Grid 17 was only one door. If that's true, then somewhere beneath the ice of Greenland there are tunnels carved into bedrock by something ancient. Something that has been traveling the same paths for longer than human history. And once in a while, when the ice melts and the rock opens, those doors briefly lead to the surface. Which means the real question about Grid 17 isn't what we saw. The real question is this. How many other doors are out there? Hidden beneath the ice. Waiting to open? And every time Arctic seismic stations record those slow pulses again. 23 seconds apart. I remember the last words from that transmission. Because if the scientist was right, then we didn't discover the creature in grid 17. We simply happened to be standing on the entrance to its road.